Quickly, I'm going to try to tackle one of the most damaging, evil, pernicious, Islamically sounding, illogically flawed arguments out there put forward by colonized Muslims. And what they normally say is, perfect yourself first, brother, focus on the basics, before you worry about ethical concerns of the world. So let's break that down into a very simple 3 points. Yeah, the first, let's use logic itself. Can one perfect themselves by ignoring the injunctions of the Quran? Makes no sense, does it? So if you ignore Islamic demands on you, how on earth are you perfecting yourself? Their argument then becomes, well, you're perfecting yourself by focusing on the rituals of Islam, and they take priority over the ethical considerations. Yeah. So logically, what we're saying is, if you want to perfect yourself, and we can say take Islam as a whole, then you follow as many rules as you possibly can, and by not following those rules, you clearly it's clearly illogical for you to be able to perfect yourself, right? So then they say, well, no, but there's a priority order. And then now let's move to number 2, the Islamic basis of their argument. I challenge them. There is no single argument out there that they can put forward that says the rituals come above the ethics. At no point can you say, using any Islamic evidence, that rituals come before ethics. In fact, everything points the other way round. Not only is there hadith that prove that ethical considerations of standing up against injustice come above and higher than rituals, even prayer. When the call commands for, when the demand comes for saving human life, for example, that trumps even prayer. And there is hadith to back this up, yeah? But let's look at the primary source, the Quran. The primary source of the Quran is 95% ethical consideration, ethical demands. It doesn't focus that much on the rituals. Yeah, it focuses heavily on the ethics that mankind is supposed to adhere to. So again, Islamically, when they say perfect yourself, what they're actually saying is take 95% of Islam out and focus on the 5%. And then they argue that the 5% is the basics. That's the most important first priority. When again, Islamically, there is no grounding for that. The only line that they could really use is that God says, I created you for only for worship. But again, they warp the word worship because they're illiterate, and worship is far more than prayer, isn't it? Worship isn't prayer. Worship is worshipping God, and thus the commands of God, which again I argue and can be, actually proven to be vastly more about ethics than petty matters about if you can pluck your eyebrows or wear short trousers, etc. Now, lastly, the actual practical implementation is kind of colonized version of Islam. Really, the people who argue this, right? You always say, they always go off, perfect yourself first, brother. Why aren't you worrying about the basics? You're talking about, high tooting fluting things when you're not doing the basics. These people then surely have done the basics, according to them, their basics, their version of the basics, which is basically rituals and arguing about, the 15 correct ways of how to wash your backside, right? They can learn those basics, right? And debate about them for the rest of their lives. Those people have never actually got ethically active. So if they have never got ethically active, then they're not at the forefront of any movement against Islamophobia. They've not set up anti-Islamophobia organisations, think tanks, animal rights, women's rights. They're not there in the active, amongst the activists, leading the activists. Then surely their argument doesn't really work, because what they basically say is, if you focus on the basics, you'll get so strong inside that you will naturally start to do these ethical things. Well, in fact, that's clearly not true, because you guys aren't doing it. You're not there. In fact, more people who do less rituals are active than ever you guys are. So again, your argument practically doesn't bear fruit. You always end that you're passive, your colonized version of faith is passive, and you end up 80-year-old guy passive and still talking about perfecting yourself. When are you ever perfect? Because I haven't seen any of you guys get perfect and actually do any of the good stuff out there in the world. So you can't have a tree that is, you know, or a plant that is diseased and think that it's going to bear you know, ripe, healthy fruit. Then the fruit that comes out of it is also unhealthy. So you know, that's the long and short of it. I don't really have an argument, and don't be taken in by the kind of religious look and religious sound of their argument. They don't really have one. Just my take on it. Like to hear your thoughts.